We actually, as humans, now, what we understand about business is that at the end of the day, it's all psychological. And what I wanted to make sure everyone understands is that people just think that chaos and stress and survival mode is just how the industry is. Like, it is just how it is. So I'll tell you this, it is not. You get such a high from being needed, you unconsciously create situations or subconsciously create situations where you then become needed. You can't create a stable business off of one that's constantly in survival mode. Or if you're constantly in survival mode, you're never going to create a stable business. We often make decisions assuming that our today's circumstance will continue. That is also why when things are really tough, we often just think they are going to be forever, which is why we make long-term decisions from short-term circumstances. We assume that the future will be reflective of our current circumstance, which is why we often make poor decisions because we are actually more emotional than rational. But to be a great business owner, you actually need to be more rational and logical than emotional. Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Accelerator Podcast. I am your host, Andrew Scott, multi-unit location owner for almost 20 years, and now we help restaurant owners increase their profits, increase their sales, and help them have more free time to spend with their family or doing whatever they want to do. For me, I like to play hockey, so hey, cool. All right, let's dive into it. Today, we are talking about survival mode, and the reason I'm talking about survival mode is I need to break a few conceptions, and I don't want to talk about survival mode in the sense of why there's survival mode or anything like that, but what I think would be really beneficial is for everyone to understand why sometimes we unconsciously create the scenarios in which we will be forced to go back into survival mode. It sounds really stupid. It's, there's people that like always date the wrong people and, it's like they never learn their lesson. Like they date this person, oh my God, I'm never dating this type of person again. And then all of a sudden, they break up and then who's the first person they're dating? Same type of person again. Maybe they date a different type of person and then they just find reasons as to why that's not exciting. It's just kind of interesting because we actually, as humans, now what we understand about business is that at the end of the day, it's all psychological, is that it comes down to the decisions we make and the reasons why we make those decisions. So I'll give you an example here. Sometimes we as business owners love to feel needed and we like to feel like the hero. And if you remember from a couple episodes ago, I talked about Vicky, who always jumped into her business whenever something was going wrong, even if she couldn't even fix it. Like her walk-in broke down, so she was driving there, even though she doesn't know how to fix a walk-in. What is she going to do, right? So she just called she called me, and I told her, well, just call a repair person, because that's what you're going to do when you get there. It's just making you feel better that you're there to support people. So she had this underlying need of wanting to support people and, feeling good about her ability to help others. So that was an underlying need for her. And once we understood that, we could actually get her to derive satisfaction in another way. There's a different way to help people that doesn't involve you going in and doing things for them, which doesn't actually help them at all because then they never learn to do it themselves, right? So the whole thing about survival mode is, tell me if you guys have seen this before. When it is go time, like when your rent check might not clear, if you've ever been in that scenario, or sales are down and you get in there, you work the extra shifts, you work 100 hours a week, you go in there and you make the decisions, and you when you need to come up with money, you find a way to come up with this promotion or something to drive it. You always manage to figure it out, right? Somehow you manage to figure it out. And then what happens is that, let's say it's a little bit of a better time where things aren't quite as bad. How come you end up repeating this cycle again? You end up going back into that same place again. And so it's because we don't actually know, we know how to get ourselves out of survival mode, in that bad situation, we know how to survive, but we don't know how to change ourselves when things are good so we don't go back there again. Here's my guess, is that if you are a restaurant owner and you've been in tough times before, you've probably been in tough times and then things got better. And then all of a sudden you found yourself back in that same place and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe we're here again. Why am I doing this thing again? It comes back around and we're surprised by it, but we really shouldn't be, because there's a couple factors in this, but one of which is that restaurants are seasonal and cyclical. So we'll see the same thing come back around again. But the other thing we need to understand is that we also need to change. Like, the person that got us through survival mode is not the person that protects us from going back into survival mode again. And so what I wanted to talk about here is why do we love it so much? And I love it in, I don't know. I say it as kind of like does anybody, let's face it. If we didn't love it, why would we keep doing it to ourselves? You know what I mean? It's like nobody likes it when they're in it, but when you pull yourself out of it, you get this high of, yes, I did it. I figured it out. We like to go in and we're the ones that become the hero and save everybody and pull everyone out of the weeds, or we salvage that customer that was complaining, or we, make the best whatever. Say if you make pizza, you're like, I'm the best pizza maker, or the pizziolo or whatever. I'm the best at this, right? And we take ourselves and we pride ourselves in that. But the thing we don't realize is that is often what keeps us small. Because if you get such a high from being needed, you unconsciously create situations or subconsciously create situations where you then become needed, right? Like, it's something we do. We don't even think about it. But let's put it, let's say, for example, you are in a situation where you are really short-staffed and you're jumping in, you're training people, you're on the line, you're doing everything you need to do, you're making it happen, you're hiring, and you're doing all this kind of stuff. And then as soon as, things get a little bit better, those people get a little bit better trained, or you're kind of out of the woods, what's the first thing you do? Well, you kind of slack off on the rest of their training. It's like one of those things like, oh, I know I should train this person on this and this, and you have maybe a training plan that lasts, say, 4 weeks or something like that. You get about 2 weeks in and they're good enough, and it's, oh, okay, now I have time to breathe. And then sure enough, what happens is those people start screwing up and they start making mistakes and they never get up to where they need to be, which creates issues inside the team, and then everyone's frustrated, and then they probably quit because they're not fully trained properly, or other people quit because they don't like working with a bunch of new people that don't know what the hell they're doing. And then you end up right back in the same spot again. Or a situation where as soon, like when you were in a tough position where you were trying to save money on labor, when you were trying to get your sales up, you'd probably be able to do whatever you can think of to grow your sales. And then you get into a better summer month, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, well, I don't have to work as much now. Things are better. So instead of then, taking that advantage to actually create a buffer for the future, or improve things for the future, or make sure we hold on to whatever success we've gotten, all of a sudden, we actually just step back and we're like, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. I'm going to work a little bit less. And then you end up like, you don't even really fill your time with anything super productive. You just kind of like, dilly-dally or do whatever. And until the point where you're then needed again and you have to scramble and you're in survival mode. So it doesn't make any logical sense when we think about it, but just think of your own patterns and how that may have happened to you, and think of in tough times versus in good times, how do you change? Do you still work with the same intensity? No, you don't. Or at least most of you don't. There might be like this one person listening to it that's, yeah, I do all the time. Okay, great. That might be you. For everybody else, we typically don't work with the same intensity when the pressure is off. And so it actually came up in a one-to-one I had with one of my team the other day, because we've had issues here and there about, execution on stuff like that. And he's been in a really great execution mode lately. And so all of a sudden I was like, hey, dude, what's different? Like, why are we getting stuff done the way that we should be now? And that wasn't the case a month ago. And he's, well, we just got no choice right now. So I have to do it. Like, the pressure's on. And I'm like, so you could have done this all of the time, but there wasn't enough pressure for you to perform. And I find that some of us are exactly like that. Like, I just perform well when the pressure's on. So the question then becomes, how do we keep the pressure on all the time is what we need to start thinking about. And thinking about in your business, like, I see this so much. We have clients that come in, they are like losing money when they come in, and they're taking out loans, and obviously they're just like stressed and they're working too much. They can't see their family. And then, we fix all that, and then they're starting to make money. And, it's a few months later. And then they're like, oh, well, if we gave them like a small couple action items to do, and they're like, oh, I didn't get to them. I'm like, oh man, did you have to go back in the restaurant? Did you have to, did you get pulled back? What happened? Like, oh no, I just didn't do it. What do you mean? So now when it becomes a time to protect yourself from actually going back into those same patterns, now you don't do it. So it's just whether that pressure's on. So the reason I'm talking about this is then what happens for us when we get clients who achieve their goals. We have to reset goals immediately because we're like, all right, so you've achieved your 1 year goal in 4 months. All right, well, we need to reset your 1 year goal to a 3 year goal. Like we need to move those up. We need to keep the pressure on because just, it's called Parkinson's law is actually the term for it, where basically we will fit, we will adjust how we work to fit the allotted amount of time. So if there's no pressure, we just don't do it. We do less. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do is that for you guys, I wanted to talk about how in the times where things are better, you actually have to work even harder. Like when things get easy, that's when you go hard. And I think about that all the time because those are the times when we can actually make the most significant difference, and that will help us never end up back in that stressful time again. And what I wanted to make sure everyone understands is that people just think that chaos and stress and survival mode is just how the industry is. Like, it is just how it is. So I'll tell you this, it is not. It is a function of your leadership. It is a function of you being able to see the patterns and predict it and get ahead of the things that happen. And so I tell this to our team all the time. Our job is to take our clients, because let's face it, most clients, when they come to us, like most restaurant owners like you guys are right now, most of them feel chaotic. It's like all of a sudden, it's a perfect example. It's it's the 1st of February when I'm filming this, but we just came through January. And like clockwork, we check in with all of our clients. It's like December. They're like, man, it's been great. I've had so much catering. We've had all these, holiday parties and everything's great. They're on top of the world. They're like, man, the bank account's solid. We're loving it. And then we're like, yeah, but like January's coming and we need to be prepared for that because your sales are going to dip and you're going to freak out because your bank account balance is going to drop for approximately 2 to 3 weeks as, things change and you end up paying expenses from when it was busy. Now that you're slower, you don't have the revenue to recoup it. And so like, you're going to notice a difference. And they're like, yeah, that's totally fine. and sure enough, first week of January comes around, we get these messages. Oh my God, what happened to my operating account? It's like clockwork every single time. But here's the deal. January comes around every friggin' year. I have yet to live a year where January has not come around. And I have yet to find a January where we don't see sales decline. In my almost 20 years of restaurant ownership, I've never not seen that. You know what I mean? It's a pattern. It happens every freaking year. The problem is that we don't plan for it. The problem is we are usually too busy in the weeds of what's happening, because then in December we're like, yeah, things are great. And they're in the business and they're working on it because they're busy and they feel like what they have to do. But then they're in survival mode there, and so then instead of actually preparing for the next time that could be a survival mode, they don't prepare for it.
Restaurant owners, before you open more locations, stop. I've seen way too many owners go from 1 to 2 to 3 to bankruptcy. I know because I was once there myself. The difference in owning multiple locations is how you have to change, and if you don't make the shift, it'll take years to recover. I took my 3 biggest lessons and put them in a free ebook called the Multi-Unit Playbook, so you don't have to go through the same struggles that I did. Go to the link in the description below and get your free copy today.
And I will tell you, a lot of our clients they had a lot of improved sales. Like most of them are up year over year this January. And the reason is because we put a lot of specific promotions in place in December, like a red envelope promotion. Like we did a lot of focus on gift cards. And there's a lot of things that we did in November and December, knowing that January was coming, and we planned it 4 to 8 weeks out. And so we spent our time focusing on that. And so therefore, a lot of our clients are much better off than they would have been had we not done that. And the difference is we have to understand the same things that makes us survive in a really tough time are not the same skills that will help us thrive in a non-survival time or even prevent that from happening. So the example that I use for my team all the time is I'm like, the clients that we have when they come in, they are in these little boats with a couple oars. Just picture yourself in like a wooden boat out in the middle of the Atlantic or the Pacific, depending on where you are. And all of a sudden, boom, this big wave hits. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God. And then you just like finish, cleaning up from that one and, getting back on course or whatever. Then bam, another one hits from a different direction. And you're just like, oh my God, I can't even see it. But if you actually went up, 5,000 feet up in the air and looked down, you could see the waves coming and you could prepare for it because you knew they were coming and you knew what to do. And so that's what we try to do with our folks, is just to make sure they can see the things that are coming. And just so you know, the next thing that's coming, there's going to be a hiring crunch in April and May because sales are typically going to go up if you are a cold weather climate, which means, the top half of the US into Canada. Your sales will start peaking like in April and May and June. That's going to be your peak time. And also at that time, there's college and university that always get out. So people are moving. There's a lot of transients. And even if you don't hire from those demographics, other people do. And then they're looking for people will affect your ability to find people when everyone's hiring at the same time. Just mark my words, watch it in about April, May, you're going to start to see the now hiring signs that, on the streets, all the little road signs for all of the retailers and stuff like that. You're going to see your Walmarts, everyone's going to be hiring, right? The thing is, if you try and hire when everyone else is hiring, you're going to have a tougher time with it. And you're going to be short-staffed. You're going to end up going back into the business because it's going to be busier. And right now you're probably thinking, well, I don't really need to hire because right now my sales aren't that busy. But here's what we're not thinking is that your sales are probably going to go up by 30, 35%. And so the question we have to ask ourselves, okay, do we have the staff for that? And so that's another thing we help our people prepare, because if you can then take advantage of getting more sales, like picture it this way. When it gets busy in peak times, what's the first thing that drops? Upselling, there's consistency in service. There's just a lot of like little things like portion control. A lot of people then stop managing their food and labor numbers. They stop logging them, stop caring about them. Oh, we're busy enough. It's whatever. But that is the time when you can actually make the biggest difference for your entire year, because guess what? An extra $2 onto your average guest check means a hell of a lot more when you're really busy than it does in, say, January when you're slow, right? Because you're probably doing double the volume. So $2 more off of, say, let's just do some rough math, say like off of 100 covers a day versus 50, like it's double. It just makes more impact for your yearly budget and your yearly profit when we focus on when you're busiest. So is the opposite of what people do, though, is they get in survival mode and then they just, figure it out. And that's how most of the restaurant industry runs. But I will tell you, that's not how the most successful restaurants run. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. Now, what I'm hoping that you guys have gotten so far is just understanding that you sometimes, whether you intend to or not, end up getting into survival mode, right? And then when things have less pressure, things are a little better, you then don't take the steps to prevent it the next time. And that's pretty much the thing that I want everyone to understand, so that you now can think about this. Okay, now that the pressure's off, what should I be marketing for 2 months from now? How should I be looking at my 12-week people plan? Because yes, the best restaurants have a 12-week people plan. I know it sounds like a long time, but who's being promoted where? Who's going to move up? What's going to be the percentage of turnover we're likely to have based on our last number of years? Like all of those things are calculations and stuff that we do to help us keep stable so we don't end up back in survival mode, because you can't create a stable business off of one that's constantly in survival mode. Or if you're constantly in survival mode, you're never going to create a stable business. Really, you just got to look at it that way. So how can you make your business more stable? Is by acting differently when you aren't forced to anymore, when you have the opportunity to. So that's why I wanted to talk about this today. It's for everybody. Probably feels normal. Probably feels like that's just how it is. I can't control it. I can't control that sales are going to go down or go up, but well, actually you can, and you can make it go up year over year. I can't control when people quit. Well, you might not be able to control when an individual quits, but you also will understand that there's always going to be turnover at certain points of the year, and you can prepare for that. You don't know who, but you know that it will happen, and so therefore you can prepare for it. So I would just question a lot of your assumptions on that are the things that you take for granted, the things you can't control, and you think, oh, the restaurant industry is always like this. This is just how the business is, because probably your restaurant friends all talk about it the same way. They're like, oh, I hate when that happens. That's just normal. That's just what it is. Well, no, it's the only way that they know how. It's the only way that they've ever done it. And so you got to understand that are the people that you're listening to the people that you want to emulate? That's the question, right? So if you ask those people, it's like, is their business a shining example of what I want? And if it isn't, don't listen to them. Find the people who have what you want and then listen to them instead. Ask them questions because they're probably seeing the world from a different lens than you are. And that's where you want to learn. So that's what I hope you guys get from today, is just understanding that there is ebbs and flows to the business. And we often create the circumstances ourselves that will put us back in survival mode, even though we don't understand it. It just means that when you feel the pressure's off, that's when you need to start looking ahead and preparing and planning, even though you're not going to want to. Because there is a psychological principle here. This is probably my favorite example of this. I would ask you, when do you invest in the stock market? When it's low or when it's high? Everybody says, oh, Andrew, I'd invest when it's low because then you can make more money. And you're like, great. Okay. And when do you sell? When it's low or when it's high? Oh, I sell when it's high because, take out the money that you've made, before it goes down again. Because, it is cyclical. It happens. We don't know when, but we know it's going to go up and we know it's going to go down. But general principles are that it will go up over time, in total amounts, but there will be fluctuations here and there based on volatility. Actually, it's largely based on emotions, but let me qualify that. So here's the thing. We know what to do. We know we're supposed to buy low and sell high. But what do the average people actually do? They actually buy when it's high and sell when it's low. How does that make any sense? So let me explain that to you. What normally happens is people are fearful. And there is a psychological thing where we think that today's circumstances will be the same circumstances of tomorrow. So when things are going great, you're going to be like, oh my God, it's awesome. I'm just going to be like this forever. So let's say you just get a raise with your brand new job. You're making lots of money. What's the first thing you do? You probably buy a more expensive TV. You probably go and get a nicer car. You might go and get a nicer house because you assume that will continue. And all of a sudden you lose your job. Guess what? Repo Man's coming for all of that. We often make decisions assuming that our today's circumstances will continue. That is also why when things are really tough, we often just think they are going to be forever, which is why we make long-term decisions from short-term circumstances. Think of that like marriages. You might be really unhappy, at a certain time. And guess what? You decide to call it quits when in reality, had you actually stuck it out, things would probably have turned around, or you may have done the things to help it turn around. But we often, give up just because we're like, oh man, I can't deal with this anymore. I just can't. It's been like this for like X amount of time. I can't go another X amount of years. Let's say it's been like this 5 years. I can't go another 5 years like that. Because the thing is, we're assuming the next 5 years is going to be exactly the same as what the last 5 years were, which is actually not true, because you can actually make a choice to change it. And so that's what we need to understand. It's like you actually get to control that. So in this stock market example, we assume that when the stock market is going up, no one buys when it's down because, well, I shouldn't say no one, but most people, because on average, there was a study, I think in the US, the average returns were like 2.5% per year, when the stock market actually returned almost 10% a year. But why did the individual investors get 2%? It was because of market timing is what it was. How this works is you don't usually buy when it's lowest because everyone's still fearful of it. And so then it starts to go up a little bit and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to see what's going to happen. Like, I'm just going to wait it out a little bit, see what's going on. And then it goes up a little bit more. And you're like, okay, things are starting to be pretty good. All right, that's awesome. And then it starts to go up again. And you're like, okay, yeah, no, things are pretty, maybe I should get some stocks right now. And then you wait a little bit longer. And then all of a sudden everyone's talking about all the amounts of money they've made in the stock market. You're like, oh man, well, now's the time. I got to get in. I got to get in on this because it's going to keep on going up and keep on going up. And I got to make my money. It's like the fear of missing out. And so then we dive into it. And then, of course, it might go up a little bit longer, but then eventually it's going to turn down. And then it starts to go down. You're like, oh man, I've lost this much already. If it goes to zero, I'll have nothing. And that's the extrapolation we make. And it keeps going down. You're like, no, I got to sell. I can't risk it. I can't risk it. And so then you sell it. And as it goes down and down and down and down, and then again, you wait until it goes up a bunch more before you buy again. Point is, what we're doing is we often buy when it's high and sell when it's low. And that is just because we think current circumstances will continue. And so that means when you're in a good place for your business, you just think that's going to continue, when the reality is as soon as that happens, you need to go, okay, what do I need to do so that this never happens again? How can I learn from what happened to prepare so that we don't endure this again, or we're not susceptible to whatever it was? But at that time, we're like, oh, we fixed it now. Everything's good. Whew. I can back off now. This is great. I can go take a nap or work, less every week, until all of a sudden shit happens again. You're right back in there. So that is the biggest thing. We assume that the future will be reflective of our current circumstance, which is why we often make poor decisions, because we are actually more emotional than rational. But to be a great business owner, you actually need to be more rational and logical than emotional. And in a survival state, you're surviving on adrenaline and emotion, and you're making it through, and then you feel good that you made it through. And then we just need to bring back the logic again to make sure it doesn't happen. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. I know there's not a ton of tricks, but it's just so crucial for us to think about these things, because as business owners, our business will take the shape, our business will only rise until the level of our leadership and our abilities and our limiting beliefs. So it will grow until that point. So if your business is consistently in a state of chaos, you got to ask yourself, how come my business is like this, right? What am I unintentionally contributing to this? How are my decisions unintentionally causing this to repeat again and again, and what can I do to fix it? And that's exactly what we need to think about, because at the end of the day, you're the one controlling the ship. And we have to understand that there's a book, it's called, what is it called? It's not Ultimate Responsibility. I think it's like Jocko Willink or something like that. Anyway, the whole premise of it is extreme ownership. That's what it's called. And the whole premise is, might not be my fault. It might not be me that made that mistake, but at some point along the line, that decision traces back to me. So let's put it this way. Say one of my employees messes up on a customer order. It's easy to be like, oh, it's that person's fault. Let's trace it back. Maybe they weren't trained well enough. Well, who trained them? It was probably me. Or if it wasn't me, it was someone that I put in a position in order to train them. Or it's the training materials that I had in place. Or if there wasn't a great system to ensure that quality control was there, that is also my fault, And so I've had clients tell me, well, it's not my fault. I didn't hire that person. I'm like, all right. So who hired them? Oh, it was my manager, Billy. And I'm like, okay. And who hired Billy? Who's me? I'm like, well, there you go. It always comes back to you, and we have to treat every failure as partly our ownership. We have to say, okay, what about that can I change to make sure that doesn't happen again? It might not have been you who did it. You might have not been the one that screwed up the order, but at the end of the day, it happened in your business, and you've got to own it, and you have to make either better decisions, better systems, better people, whatever the case is, to make sure that doesn't happen again, and that is the kind of ownership. And so if your business is volatile, going up and down, you find yourself being the hero, being forced to go back in and bailing everybody out all the time, that's actually by your design. You were just unintentionally designing it that way because you haven't actually proactively designed it in the way that's going to be sustainable and good for you. You probably just don't know how, and that's okay until you actually want to have a different type of business, and that's where it's not okay. We need to do something different. All right, guys, hope this was helpful. I've been there. I've been through this, and I've seen it, and I think I'm just far enough away from it to be able to see the patterns and to see other people's businesses and what they're going through. And I hope that this is helpful, just to kind of get you to take a peek from a 20,000 foot view. Even if you're in the weeds in the thick of it right now, it's just important to understand. All right, guys, hope this is helpful. We'll chat soon.